An arrogant millionaire believes he has absolute control of a multi-million-dollar business, until the son of a simple maid reveals, with a note written in perfect German, a conspiracy that can destroy empires and forever changes the fate of everyone in that room. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel now to help us continue impacting lives. In the heart of New York, atop the luxurious Skyark Hotel, a business dinner seemed like just another meeting between corporate giants. Crystal chandeliers reflected their golden glow onto the marble table, where 38-year-old millionaire Carter Hale displayed his cool, calculating confidence. Dressed in a tailored Armani suit, he seemed to command not only the room, but also the fate of everyone present. With every movement of his wine glass, every word spoken with precision and firmness, international investors saw in him the living portrait of power. For Carter, there was no room for error. Life was a chessboard, and he always played like a king. At that moment, he sought not only to close a billion-dollar deal, but also to reinforce his image as an unshakable man. The dinner, however, held an unexpected twist, and it all began when he decided to flaunt something no one in the room would dare dispute: his ability with foreign languages. While the business elite discussed numbers and clauses, a nearly invisible presence moved among the tables. Rosa Martinez, the maid in charge of serving water and clearing dishes, walked with silent steps, carrying the weight of a hard life on her shoulders. Few noticed her existence. To the millionaires, she was nothing more than part of the scenery, as inconspicuous as the artwork on the walls. But sitting in a chair in the corner, patiently waiting for his mother's shift to end, was Matteo, her 14-year-old son. A watchful boy, dark-skinned, and carrying a simple backpack, he carried worn notebooks and a world of dreams. To Carter and the investors, that boy meant absolutely nothing. But fate was about to pit a maid's son against an arrogant millionaire, and the shock of their encounter would forever change the course of that evening. Carter, in a calculated gesture, leaned forward and, in front of the foreign investors, decided to quote a hidden clause of the contract in German. His voice sounded firm, charged with arrogance, as if each word were a demonstration of intellectual superiority. He smiled disdainfully and quipped in English, "I doubt anyone here can even understand what's written in this passage." The room responded with polite laughter, confirming Carter's power in that moment. But then silence fell suddenly, as an unexpected voice echoed, young, firm, clear, and in perfect German. Matteo, the housekeeper's son, had responded to the clause with impressive ease. The millionaire's glass stopped halfway to his lips. The investors looked at each other in surprise. Rosa, motionless, almost dropped the tray. Carter Hale, accustomed to always controlling every detail, felt something he rarely experienced: a loss of control. What had that boy just done in front of everyone? The silence that fell over the room was so thick it felt like it could be touched. The investors, experienced men accustomed to handling fortunes and million-dollar contracts, were stunned to hear the firm voice of a boy of just 14 challenging Carter Hale's verbal assurance. The millionaire, who always controlled every reaction around him, felt the weight of vulnerability for the first time in years. He tried to hide it, but the almost imperceptible tremor in his hand as he held the glass betrayed the impact. Rosa, in the background, watched with her heart racing, unsure whether to reprimand her son for such boldness or to be proud of his courage. The contrast was stark: Carter's cold, arrogant power versus the simplicity of a boy with nothing to lose. Still, everyone knew that moment had changed the course of the evening, and possibly much more than that. Matteo, without hesitation, completed the sentence in German and translated it clearly for everyone to understand. But he didn't stop there. Feigning innocence, he took a folded piece of paper from his pocket and discreetly placed it next to Carter's glass. The millionaire, trying to maintain his composure in the face of curious gazes, slid his hand toward the note without arousing suspicion. Unfolding it under the table, he read the words that made him shiver inside. Clause 12.4 secretly transfers your patents to the rival company. The discrepancy in the numbering is not an error. Furthermore, the man in the blue tie is recording you. Carter carefully raised his gaze and, for the first time that night, looked directly at the boy. The millionaire's heart raced. Who was this boy to know something that even his lawyers had ignored? As the investors resumed superficial conversations to disguise the tension, Carter realized the gravity of the situation. The man in the blue tie was indeed holding the phone at a suspicious angle, exactly as the note had warned. Everything pointed to corporate espionage, something that could cost billions if the information fell into the wrong hands. The millionaire leaned back in his chair, but his mind was racing. Every fiber of his being screamed that there was a traitor in the room, someone who had allowed this clause to slip through the cracks until the final negotiations. And, unexpectedly, the warning came not from his legal team or his advisors, but from the maid's son. Carter knew he couldn't react immediately, not there, not in front of everyone. But a certainty burned within him. That note changed everything. And the next decision he made could make or break his empire. Carter finished reading the note, and for a moment, his expression almost faltered. He quickly regained his mask of indifference, smiling at the investors as if nothing had happened. However, inside, his entire body was on alert. His peripheral vision captured every movement of the man in the blue tie, and his strategic mind was already calculating how to act without arousing suspicion. He raised his wine glass to his lips, hiding his gaze, which discreetly shifted to Rosa and Matteo, still nearby. Never, in all his years of negotiations, had he imagined he would depend on a boy for protection. Wounded pride burned within him, but the sense of imminent danger was stronger. This was no simple business game. Espionage was underway, and the 14-year-old had just proven he knew more than he let on. For the first time, Carter found himself torn between the contempt he had always harbored for the invisible and the urgent need to understand how that boy had discovered something so serious. Rosa noticed the tension on the millionaire's face, even though he tried to hide it. Her mother's instincts spoke louder. Matteo had taken a risk by intervening, and now they could be in trouble. While pretending to straighten the tablecloth on a nearby table, she murmured to her son in a scolding tone, "Matteo, what have you done?" The boy, however, remained calm, his eyes fixed on Carter, as if he knew his intervention was not only necessary, but inevitable. Carter, noticing the exchange between mother and son, decided to act. With a calculated gesture, he rose from the table, adjusted his jacket, and announced loudly, "Gentlemen, I ask your permission for a few minutes. I need to take an urgent call." The investors nodded, distracted by the false normality of the situation, while Carter walked away with the note discreetly crumpled in his hand. But the millionaire didn't go to the phone. He knew he had only seconds to confront the truth. In the marble hallway, far from the eyes of the guests, Carter turned abruptly and found Rosa and Matteo already close, almost as if they sensed what was coming. The millionaire stared at the woman coldly, then fixed his gaze on the boy. "How did you know?" he asked, his voice low, thick with suspicion and disbelief. Rosa tried to intervene, but Matteo spoke before she could react. With a calmness that belied his age, the boy replied, "I read these contracts. I helped my mother translate documents to earn a little money. I saw the mistake. It wasn't a mistake, it was a trap." Carter watched him silently, feeling the weight of the words echo in his mind. For the first time that night, his arrogance seemed to tremble. There, before him, stood not just the son of a maid, but someone who could change the course of his company's destiny. And before Carter could react, hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway, approaching faster and faster. The footsteps echoing in the hallway sounded like warning drums. Carter instinctively stiffened and tucked the note into his jacket pocket. Rosa grabbed Mateo's arm, instinctively protecting him, as if sensing danger. The millionaire didn't like being surprised, but now he had no choice. Two of his own trusted aides appeared around the corner, both with tense expressions, as if searching for something specific. "Mr. Hale, the investors are awaiting your confirmation on the clause," one of them said, trying to sound casual, but Carter sensed the barely concealed nervousness. The second glanced at Rosa and Mateo, lingering a second longer than he should have, as if recognizing their presence was no accident. Carter felt a chill run down his spine. Someone within his team knew what the note was about, and it signified betrayal. The millionaire took a deep breath, aware that every next word could put his fortune, and even his life, at risk. In a calm and controlled voice, Carter responded to his assistants. "Tell them I'm reviewing something important. I won't be long." The look he gave them, however, had the cutting coldness of someone accustomed to giving orders that cannot be questioned. The two nodded and left, but Carter noticed the detail that confirmed his worst fears. One of them, before leaving, discreetly glanced at the pocket where he kept the note. The millionaire knew. It was no coincidence. There were too many watchful eyes that night. Once they were alone again, Rosa looked at Carter firmly. "Sir, please don't involve my son in this." He didn't want to get involved. But Carter, still shaken by what he had read, replied harshly, "It wasn't him who got involved, Mrs. Martinez. It was the fraud that found in him the courage none of you had." Mateo kept his eyes fixed on the millionaire, unafraid. For the first time, Carter felt he wasn't in control of the situation. Deciding he could delay no longer, Carter leaned forward, looking directly at Mateo. "If this is true, kid, you didn't just save me from disaster. You just showed me that someone in my own circle is trying to destroy me." Rosa squeezed her son's hand, as if silently begging him to say nothing more. But Mateo, moved by an almost naive courage, retorted, "I only told you what I read. The rest you have to figure out for yourself." Carter assessed the boy for long seconds, as he would any executive facing a billion-dollar merger. There was conviction in those eyes. There was truth, and it disarmed him. Before he could respond, a metallic sound echoed from the room. A glass falling, raised voices, chairs scraping hurriedly. Chaos had begun on the other side of the door, and Carter understood immediately. The secret of the note was no longer his alone. The room that had been brimming with luxury minutes before now seemed about to collapse with tension. Investors rose from their chairs, voices in different languages echoed with concern, and the waiters tried in vain to contain the commotion. Carter Hale re-entered the room with the cold gaze of a predator, and immediately noticed the focus of everyone's gaze, the man in the blue tie. He discreetly tried to turn off his cell phone, but it was too late. One of the American investors, more agitated, demanded an explanation. What was he recording? Carter walked slowly, each step calculated, feeling the weight of authority return to his body. But inside him, anger throbbed. This wasn't just a risky contract. There was an ambush set to destroy him. The millionaire knew he needed to act quickly, but he couldn't yet reveal the source of the discovery. If he revealed that a 14-year-old boy and his employed mother had alerted him, he would immediately lose credibility. Rosa, still near the entrance, observed every detail with a knot in her stomach. She knew this environment wasn't for them. They were intruders in a world of wealth and power. But seeing Mateo, firm and silent, her heart was torn between fear and pride. The boy, unnoticed, was already calculating the millionaire's every reaction. Carter, in turn, turned to his assistants and ordered in a firm voice, "Get this man up. I want to see what's on his phone." The silence that followed was almost suffocating. 2 hotel security guards approached and took the phone from the suspect's hands. Carter took it and, without hesitation, unlocked the screen with a command. The video was there, recording the entire meeting, with special focus on every word he had uttered in German. Worse, the contract lay open on the table. It was enough evidence to be used against him and ruin not only the business, but also his public reputation. The millionaire slammed his cell phone shut, his gaze slowly scanning the room. The investors, restless, waited for a reaction, a response that would reaffirm his authority. Carter took a deep breath, hid the note in his inside pocket, and spoke in the coldest voice he had ever used. "This meeting is over. Anyone who wants to talk business with me will have to wait. And I guarantee that only those who truly deserve to be at my table will be at my table." There were murmurs, protests, and exchanged glances. But no one dared confront him directly. Carter walked out the door, the security guards behind him, carrying the man in the blue tie. Rosa and Mateo followed with uncertain steps, unsure of what would come next. In the hallway, Carter stopped, turned to the boy, and said in a low voice, "You started this. Now you're going to tell me everything you know." Before Mateo could respond, another phone rang, this time in Carter's pocket. He answered, and the voice on the other end made his blood run cold. "We know the note reached you." Carter pressed the cell phone to his ear, moving away from Rosa and Mateo so they wouldn't hear. The voice on the other end was cold, calculating, and carried a strange confidence. "There's no point in trying to hide it, Hale. We already have the document. What you're holding won't save your company." The millionaire stopped in the middle of the hallway, staring at a random spot on the wall, trying to decipher the speaker's identity. It was someone who knew too many details about the meeting, the contract, and especially the note. "Who are you?" he asked quietly, but the answer was only a short, mocking laugh. Then the line dropped. Carter remained motionless, feeling that, for the first time in years, he was being manipulated within his own territory. The betrayal was coming from close by, much closer than he cared to admit. As Carter digested the enigmatic words, Rosa approached, uneasily. "Mr. Hale, what's going on? Mateo shouldn't be here." She held her son's arm tightly, but he broke free and faced the millionaire head-on. "If you don't do anything, they'll win," he said with conviction, his voice firm despite his young age. Carter stared at him for a few seconds, and it was impossible to ignore the courage emanating from that look. Deep down, he knew Mateo was right. This wasn't the time to give in. But his strategist's mind struggled with wounded pride. How could he accept that he was relying on a teenager to handle a conspiracy that could cost billions? Rosa noticed the hesitation on his face and added, "My son doesn't deserve to get involved, but you can't continue this war alone either." Carter clenched his fists. For the first time, the word war didn't seem like an exaggeration. Taking a deep breath, Carter made a decision that would completely change the course of that evening. He looked at Mateo and said, his voice deep and determined, "If you know something I don't, you'll tell me. And if that's true, you'll be under my protection from now on." Rosa protested, "He's just a boy." But Carter retorted firmly, "Not anymore. Today, he's already proven himself to be more of a man than many of those who sat at that table." The hallway fell into silence, broken only by the hurried footsteps of the returning security guards. "Mr. Hale, we found more notes in the pocket of the man with the blue tie," one of them said. handing over a sealed envelope. Carter opened it, and inside were copies of the contract with highlighted sections and instructions in German. At the end, a sentence written in English, in all caps. "This is just the beginning." Back at the Skyark Hotel penthouse, Carter could no longer hide his pent-up fury. The envelope in his hands was proof that the conspiracy wasn't just coming from outside, but had deep roots within his own company. He sat silently in a leather armchair, while Rosa and Matteo remained nearby, unsure whether to leave or wait. Carter opened the boy's note again and compared the notes he found with the copy of the contract. The German words revealed meticulously manipulated clauses, as if someone had rewritten entire sections to reveal trade secrets. This wasn't the work of amateurs. It was the work of someone with privileged access, someone inside Hale and North Technologies. The millionaire, accustomed to having every detail under his control, now realized he was facing an invisible enemy, one that stalked the very corridors he thought he dominated. The air in the room seemed heavier, and for the first time, Carter wondered, who could he still trust? Matteo, curious and attentive, couldn't hide his thoughts. He approached slowly, looking at the open contract. "This isn't just a mistake, it's a trap, and it's been here from the beginning," he murmured, pointing to the altered sections. Carter looked up at the boy, surprised by his clarity. "How do you know that?" he asked, more intrigued than incredulous. Matteo took a deep breath and explained, "I study languages on my own. German, French, whatever I can find in books or online. Sometimes I translate documents to help my mother. When I read this clause, I realized it didn't make sense. So I compared it with other versions of the contract that were available in public reports." Carter remained silent. His mind was rapidly calculating. The boy had uncovered a fraud that his millionaire lawyers and consultants had missed. Shock was mixed with admiration, but also with a bitter feeling. A 14-year-old had seen what his entire team had failed to see. Rosa, apprehensive, tried to interrupt. "Matteo, that's enough. You don't need to say anything else." But Carter raised his hand, signaling silence. "Let him finish," he said, his tone undebatable. The maid lowered her head, torn between fear and the certainty that something bigger was happening before her eyes. Carter stood, walked to the glass window overlooking the endless lights of Manhattan, and spoke softly. "If they manage to alter this without me noticing, it means someone I trust is involved. And if this gets out, everything I've built could crumble in a matter of hours." Rosa approached and boldly asked, "And what are you going to do?" Carter stared at her for a few seconds, then turned his gaze to Matteo. "I'm going to find out who's behind this. But to do that, I need you both to be ready for something much bigger than you imagine." Before Rosa could protest, a notification rang on Carter's phone. It was an anonymous message with just 2 words in German. "ZUSBA with diary Sisti." Too late. Carter's cell phone landed on the glass table with a sharp slam. Those 2 words, "ZUSBA with diary Sisti," echoed in his mind like a sentence. Too late. But too late for what? He scanned the penthouse with his eyes, breathing heavily, trying to identify any sign of intrusion. Rosa curled up on the sofa, holding Matteo's hands, who watched him with wide eyes. The millionaire pressed a button embedded in the side of the wall, and the automatic windows closed, reinforcing the room's security. The metallic sound of the lock echoed through the room, heightening the tension. "Someone knew this contract would be with me today? This is no coincidence," Carter said, his voice thick with ice. For the first time, Rosa realized the weight of the corporate war her boss was engaged in. It wasn't just about money, but about power, blackmail, and destruction. Matteo stood up slowly, regarding Carter with unusual seriousness for his age. "They're watching you, aren't they?" If they know about the contract, they know about the note too. They know I read it. The statement made Rosa shiver. No, my son, don't say that. You don't understand the danger. But Carter, still motionless before the locked screen of his cell phone, replied gravely. He understands, Rosa. More than many men who have sat at my negotiating table. Silence fell for a few seconds, interrupted only by the distant rumble of nighttime city traffic. Carter turned suddenly, grabbed an untouched glass of whiskey, and poured it onto the floor, watching the liquid drip down the marble. If they think they've already won, they're wrong, he murmured. Rosa, frightened, couldn't tell if those words were promise or despair. Just then, the penthouse shook slightly, as if something had happened on the lower floors. The lights flickered for a second. Carter's eyes widened and he ran to the security panel, typing in rapid commands. On the screen, a red notification flashed nonstop. System compromised, unauthorized access. Rosa let out a low, instinctive cry as she hugged Mateo. Are they here? She asked, her voice trembling. Carter didn't answer immediately. His eyes, cold and focused, analyzed every detail. It's not physical, yet. It's the surveillance system. They're trying to erase the footage from the last 24 hours. Mateo, quicker than his mother expected, approached and pointed to a line of code flashing on the monitor. Look, they couldn't wipe everything. There's still a backup mirror. Carter looked at him in surprise, a mix of pride and disbelief. But before he could react, the screen suddenly went black, plunging the room into total darkness. The darkness that enveloped the penthouse lasted only a few seconds, but they were the longest of Rosa and Mateo's lives. The emergency generator activated, casting a reddish light that painted the entire room in shades of warning. Carter remained motionless for a moment, like a predator scenting danger before attacking. The millionaire approached the glass desk, opened a secret drawer, and removed a black folder bearing the Hale and North logo. Inside were confidential documents and a password-protected flash drive. That's what they want, he said quietly, almost to himself. Rosa watched him, confused. But why? What could be so valuable? Carter took a deep breath, looking at her seriously. These files prove that one of my own directors sold his soul to the competition. And now, we're all at risk. Mateo, who had remained silent until then, stepped forward, his face illuminated by the red light. They don't just want the papers, they want to silence us. I saw how they were disguised in the hotel, as if they were just guests. They're infiltrating everything, waiting for the right opportunity. Rosa turned, surprised, unsure whether to reprimand her son for speaking like that or to tremble even more at what it meant. Carter, however, listened attentively. You noticed the details that even my security team overlooked. It's no coincidence, Mateo. You have a trained eye for the truth. The boy lowered his eyes, embarrassed, but said nothing. Rosa then exploded. Enough. He's only 14. I don't want my son involved in this. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of an insistent beeping on the door's electronic panel. A warning appeared in red letters. External access detected, level 3. Carter ran to the panel, typing codes quickly, but the message wouldn't disappear. They're trying to physically break in, he said, his voice firm, but his eyes filled with tension. Rosa gripped Mateo's hand tightly, sensing that danger had finally reached her door. What are we going to do? She asked, her breath ragged. Carter closed the folder, holding it to his chest. We'll fight with what we've got, but if they get in, the priority is keeping you alive. Rosa looked at him in disbelief. And you? He gave a slight, grim smile. I've lived long enough to know that everything I've achieved is worthless if it can't protect one simple truth. Before he could say anything else, a loud bang shook the armored door, as if someone on the other side was about to break it down. The crash echoed through the penthouse like a metallic thunderclap, vibrating the walls. Rosa instinctively pulled Matteo behind a sofa, trying to shield him with her own body. Carter, for his part, remained standing in front of the door, fists clenched and his gaze fixed on the electronic panel that was flashing red. They shouldn't have made it this far. Someone inside gave away our whereabouts. The revelation fell like an icy blade on Rosa. Inside? You mean even your own team? Carter merely nodded, his jaw tense. The millionaire typed a few more commands, activating a protocol that caused the reinforced shutters to close completely. The room now felt like a fortress, but the increasingly violent pounding on the door betrayed that time was running out. Matteo peered over the sofa, his eyes alert. They're trying to distract us. Look, the electronic lock is blinking in sequence. This isn't just brute force, it's a hack code. Carter looked at him in surprise once more, but didn't have time to respond. The boy seemed to see what others didn't, as if he'd been born to decipher hidden signals. Rosa, desperate, cupped her son's face. Matteo, no. This isn't your responsibility. You're still just a child. But the boy kept his eyes fixed on the panel, his mind racing. If they manage to break the code, the door won't hold. Carter took a deep breath, weighing each word. For the first time, the man who controlled empires seemed to recognize that his fate could rest in the hands of a 14-year-old. On the other side of the door, the noise suddenly stopped, replaced by a terrifying silence. Rosa clutched Matteo's arm, her heart racing. Did they give up? She whispered. Carter frowned, walking to the side of the room, where a secondary panel displayed the external cameras, but all the screens were black. No, they didn't give up. This is much worse. At the same moment, a low hum ran through the walls, and the red lights began to flicker as if something were interfering with the power system. Rosa backed away with Matteo, but Carter remained still, as if waiting for confirmation of a dark premonition. They're already in here, she said, her voice low, almost a whisper of condemnation. And before anyone could react, a shadow crossed the hallway lit by the flickering lights, advancing toward the room. The shadow moved slowly down the hallway until it was revealed by the emergency light. It was a tall man wearing an impeccable black suit, but the detail that chilled Carter's blood was the silky blue tie, the same one mentioned in the first note. Rosa instinctively backed away, pressing Matteo against her chest, as if to hide him from the intruder's view. The stranger walked unhurriedly, as if certain no one in that penthouse could stop him. Carter raised his voice, firm and cutting. You don't belong here. Tell me who sent you. The man smirked, a cold smile, before slightly opening his jacket and revealing an electronic device attached to his belt, flashing green and red lights. I wasn't sent, Mr. Hale. I was warned, and I arrived just in time to finish what you started at the hotel. Matteo, his eyes fixed on the device, whispered almost unconsciously. It's a signal disruptor. It's cutting off all communications, blocking cameras, locks, everything. Carter gave the boy a surprised look, but didn't question him. Instead, he took a step forward, maintaining his intimidating tone. If you think you can come into my house and threaten me, you're mistaken. The man tilted his head, studying Carter as if he were just another piece on a chessboard. You still don't understand. I didn't come after you. I came after him. Rosa froze, her heart racing as she felt the weight of the intruder's gaze fall on Matteo. My son has nothing to do with this, she shouted, stepping forward. But the man just smiled, indifferent to her mother's despair. On the contrary, Mrs. Martinez. He's the key. Carter felt his stomach churn. Everything suddenly made sense. The note, the messages, the ease with which Matteo identified every hidden detail. It wasn't just luck, It wasn't just talent. "What do you mean by the key?" he asked, keeping his voice controlled, though his mind was already racing. The man in the blue tie took a few steps, stopping just a few feet from Rosa and Matteo. His cold eyes reflected the red light of the alarm, as if glowing in the dark. "The boy has something that even you don't realize. Something that could make or break the entire empire you've built." Rosa felt her legs weaken, but she didn't back away. She hugged Matteo even tighter, while Carter took a step forward, prepared to face the intruder at any cost. But before he could act, the man raised the device on his belt, and a sharp sound filled the air, making everyone double over in pain. The piercing sound spread through the room like invisible blades, piercing ears and minds. Rosa fell to her knees, pressing her hands to her head as she struggled to keep Matteo safe in her arms. The boy, however, didn't seem as shaken as the adults. His eyes remained fixed on the device, as if deciphering patterns in the deafening noise. Carter, even with his body in shock and his hands covering his ears, forced himself to his feet, defying the pain. "What are you doing to them?" he shouted, his voice nearly drowned out by the piercing frequency. The man in the blue tie just watched, impassive. "I'm not doing anything, Mr. Hale. I'm just awakening what already exists." And in that instant, Carter realized Matteo wasn't trying to resist. He was listening, absorbing something no one else could. The boy slowly raised his head, his eyes glowing unusually in the red light. "That's not just noise. It's data, codes hidden in frequency." His voice was firm, yet low, and Rosa stared at him as if she didn't recognize her own son. "Matteo, what are you talking about?" The boy took a deep breath, still staring at the device. "It's transmitting information in sound waves, disguised as noise. I can hear the logic behind it, as if it were lines of programming sung in another language." Carter was speechless for a moment, unable to process the scene. "That's impossible," he murmured. But the intruder smiled with satisfaction. "No, Mr. Hale. It's inevitable. The boy was born with something rare, an ability even he didn't understand until now. He's not just a bystander in this war. He's the living code that can rewrite the fate of your company, and of all of us." Rosa, still trembling, stood in front of her son, her eyes brimming with tears. "No, you will not use my boy as a weapon in your power games." The man inclined his head, as if taking pity on her. "It's not your decision. The future is already in motion, and he is the catalyst." Carter stepped forward, his business predator instincts now converted to pure fury. "If you think you can touch him, you'll find out what it means to mess with someone who has nothing to lose." The silence that followed was interrupted by the metallic click of the intruder, who turned off the device. The high-pitched sound abruptly ceased, leaving the room plunged into an oppressive silence. Matteo was breathing heavily, but his eyes still glowed, as if the frequency had activated something in his mind. It was then that the man said, with frightening calm, "He's already made his choice. He just hasn't realized it yet." Matteo was still breathing heavily, but his eyes roamed the room as if seeing more than walls, furniture, and people. He walked to the security panel, ignoring Rosa's distressed pleas, and placed his hand on the blank screen. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the system's dead lights began to flicker, revealing fragments of code and corrupted camera footage. Carter approached, stunned. "This isn't possible. The system has been completely destroyed." But there it was, before his eyes, Matteo deciphering, reorganizing, restoring information that his own company's engineers would have considered irrecoverable. Rosa covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. "My son, what are they doing to you?" But Matteo didn't seem to hear. His mind was elsewhere, navigating invisible threads of logic and hidden language. The man in the blue tie watched with cold satisfaction, like a conductor before his orchestra. See, Mr. Hale? He doesn't need training nor machines. He's the machine himself. The boy connects patterns the rest of us could only understand through years of study and advanced algorithms. Carter turned, his eyes filled with rage. He's 14. You're trying to turn him into something he's not, trying to use his talent to destroy. The intruder shook his head slowly. No, I merely awakened what was already there. You should be thanking me. This gift could make or break entire empires. Rosa clutched Carter's arm in desperation. Please, make this stop. He's not a code. He's not a weapon. He's just my son. Carter took a deep breath, his heart hammering in his chest, but he didn't take his eyes off Mateo. For the first time, he understood that this boy was far more important than any contract or fortune. Mateo blinked, and suddenly the panel came to life. The cameras displayed real-time footage, revealing empty corridors, sealed doors, and even the locked-down lower floor. I managed to bypass the intrusion, the boy said, his voice still breathless but firm. They can't erase anything anymore. All the records are intact. Only now they're duplicated on a hidden server. Carter approached slowly, as if afraid of breaking a spell. You saved everything. No one else could have done this. Rosa hugged Mateo tightly, but the boy still stared at the panel, as if something bigger was approaching. It was then that the man in the blue tie stepped forward, his expression grim. Yes, he saved it, but he also exposed himself. Now everyone hunting you knows exactly where to look. The words of the man in the blue tie hung in the air like a sentence. Rosa shivered and pulled Mateo close, as if she could hide him from the entire world. Carter, however, didn't look away from the intruder. Explain yourself, he said commandingly, his deep voice resonating throughout the room. The man smiled slightly, as if relishing the tension he created. By reactivating the system and duplicating the files, the boy opened a digital beacon. Now, no matter how strong your walls are, Carter Hale, they've tracked him, and they won't just come for you, they'll come for him. Mateo swallowed, trying to hide his fear, but Carter saw in his eyes the courage of someone who had never chosen to be on that battlefield. Rosa shouted, "Enough! You're treating my son like a code, like a weapon, when he's just a child." But the truth was, everyone there knew, there was no turning back. Carter took a deep breath, his mind racing. For years, he had faced corporate rivals, politicians, and investors who had tried to bring him down. But nothing compared to what was happening before his eyes. Rosa was trembling, and he could feel her fighting the instinct to flee with Mateo in her arms, even though she knew escape would be impossible. The millionaire stepped forward, placing himself between the intruder and them. If they're coming, then they'll have to get past me first. The blue tie raised an eyebrow, as if he found the gesture almost naive. Don't you understand, Mr. Hale? They don't need to bring you down. They just need to convince you to hand over the boy. And knowing your reputation, they'll bet your ambition will outweigh your courage. Carter clenched his fists, feeling the accusation like a direct blow to his pride. For the first time, he wasn't sure if the reputation he had built as a ruthless man would protect or destroy him. Suddenly, the panel flashed again, emitting a deep beeping sound. A message in white letters appeared on the screen. Transfer started, files 12.4. Carter's eyes widened in fury. This is impossible. I just sealed all access. Mateo wrenched himself free from his mother's arms and ran to the panel, his fingers swiping across the screen, searching for the source of the intrusion. It's not from inside. They're pulling it straight from the mirror I created. They've tracked it. Rosa screamed her son's name, but Carter was already at his side, protecting him as if he were his own flesh and blood. The intruder smiled, satisfied, and took a step back into the darkness of the corridor. Now you understand. No fortress is strong enough. No secret lasts. The war has begun, and the boy is the prize. Before anyone could stop him, the steel door shuddered again, this time not from outside, but from within the penthouse walls themselves. The penthouse walls vibrated as if alive, and the metallic sound reverberated in every corner. Rosa clutched Matteo to her, terrified, while Carter tried to understand the impossible. How could someone be attacking from within his own fortress? The central panel flashed red, revealing a sequence of alerts. Internal intrusion, subsystem compromised. Carter took a deep breath, his mind working like a billion-dollar negotiation, fast and precise. They didn't come in through the door, he murmured. They were already here. Rosa turned to him, confused. What do you mean? But the millionaire already knew the answer. Someone he trusted had betrayed him. As the tension grew, a side compartment creaked open, and from within emerged a short man in a Hale and North security uniform, his face partially obscured by a black mask. "Good evening, Mr. Hale," he said coldly. "I'm afraid your era of control is over." Carter froze for a moment, immediately recognizing the voice. Anderson. The name came out like venom. Rosa and Matteo looked at each other in confusion, but Carter knew this man well. He was one of her longest-serving personal bodyguards, someone who had sworn to protect her life in exchange for a salary that surpassed any market standard. "You were on my side for years." "What?" Anderson removed his mask, revealing dark, resentful eyes. "Because I was never on your side. I was always on the right side, the one that pays the most. And this time, they paid in gold." Rosa felt a chill run through her body as Carter took a step forward, anger palpable in every word. "You sold not only my trust, but the lives of these innocent people. Do you know what will happen if you get your hands on this boy?" Anderson smiled coldly. "I know exactly what will happen, and that's why I'm here." Matteo, still clinging to his mother's arm, whispered, "He wants the files, and me." Carter tried to advance, but Anderson raised a compact electric pulse weapon, pointing it directly at the boy. Rosa screamed, instinctively stepping in front of her son. "If you touch him, you'll have to go through me." The tension was unbearable. Every second seemed about to explode. Carter raised his hands slowly, trying to negotiate as he would in any boardroom. "Anderson, listen to me. You don't understand what you hold in your hands. These files aren't just a contract. They carry a web of international betrayal. If they win, you won't have gold, you'll have only chains." Anderson laughed indifferently. "Golden chains are still worth more than the illusion of power you defend." He pulled the trigger, releasing an electric crackle that lit the room blue. Rosa screamed, Carter advanced, but the shot didn't hit either of them. The gun stopped inches from Matteo, as if blocked by something invisible. The blue snap froze in the air, and everyone stood still for a moment that seemed eternal. Anderson stared in disbelief at the gun in his hand, trying to fire again, but the device simply wouldn't respond. Matteo stood still, his eyes fixed on the metal tip, as if he'd somehow controlled it. "It wasn't luck," Carter murmured, feeling a shiver run down his spine. He blocked the pulse. Rosa looked at her son, tears streaming down her face. "Matteo, what did you do?" The boy, still trembling, replied quietly, "I just heard the code. It was wrong, so I shut it down." The silence that followed was broken by Anderson's heavy breathing, which seemed to be confronted with something beyond any training. "That's not human," he whispered, taking a step back. But Carter, with a mixture of fear and pride, replied, "No, that's the new definition of human." Anderson tried to regain control, drawing a short blade from his waist and advancing desperately. Carter reacted quickly, intercepting him with a sharp blow, and the two rolled across the floor in a fierce struggle. Rosa screamed, protecting Mateo, as the metallic sound echoed through the room. Carter, even exhausted, managed to immobilize the traitor with a well-aimed blow, knocking the blade away and pinning him to the floor. "You're done, Anderson," he roared, his voice filled with fury and relief. The man still tried to resist, but Mateo stepped forward, his eyes shining again. "He can't hurt us anymore." The security panel beeped, and suddenly the penthouse's armored doors opened automatically. A burst of light flooded the room, revealing the entrance of counterintelligence agents allied with Carter, summoned minutes earlier by a secret protocol. Anderson was immediately restrained, led away amid shouts of rage and promises of revenge. Silence fell once more in the room, now illuminated by the cold light of dawn streaming through the windows. Rosa fell to her knees, hugging Mateo with all her strength. "My son, you're not just special. You're the reason we're still alive." Carter took a deep breath, staring at them both with a look unlike anything he'd ever shown in his life. Not that of a boss or a millionaire, but of a man transformed. "Mateo, you saved me. Not just me, but everything I've built. And you did it because you saw the truth when no one else did." The boy, exhausted, simply rested his head on his mother's shoulder, while Rosa wept silently. Carter approached, placing a firm hand on the boy's shoulder. "No matter what comes next, you'll never be invisible again." Rosa looked up at him, surprised by the tenderness in his voice. And, outside, the city was waking up, without imagining that inside that penthouse, a conspiracy had been dismantled, not by a powerful millionaire, but by the son of a maid who, with a simple note and unexpected courage, had changed everyone's destiny. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel now, activate the bell, and share. This way, you'll help us bring you more moving stories that impact and transform lives. Thank you so much for your support.